So I've been a Java developer for quite a few years now, and over the years I've used a lot of different IDEs. I learned Java using NetBeans. And then my first few years working as a software engineer, I used Eclipse. And I know, blasphemy. What was I thinking? At the time, I had a lot of people telling me I need to try out IntelliJ. And once I did, well, I understand why they said that because I've never looked back. And ever since, I have been refining it, improving it, making it as helpful as possible, and in a way where it just kind of gets out of my way while still doing everything that I need it to do. So this is my IntelliJ IDEA setup for Java development after about 7 or so years. What made the cut, why, and how I go about using it day to day, from writing code and navigating through it and debugging and testing, the whole gambit. And this video is brought to you by JetBrains. Now, I feel like this goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. This is my real setup. I've actually thought about making this video since December of 2022, just never got around to it until just a few months ago, the IntelliJ IDEA team reached out wanting to sponsor a video, and I said, I got just the video for you. So here it is. First and foremost, the theme. So this is my own custom theme called Forest Night, spelled incorrectly, 1 R and no K. And I haven't made it publicly available yet, but maybe I will by the time this video goes live. The font is the default font, JetBrains Mono, because it's really nice. There's really no point in changing it. But there are a few default settings and configurations that are worth changing, which is probably the most important thing I do for my setup here. One of which, changing the max heap size from 2 gigabytes to 8 gigabytes. Because IntelliJ itself runs on the JVM. And what this does right here is passing the XMX flag for the value for the IDE itself. This is separate from Gradle, from the compiler, from whatever application I'm running. And even though I have 128 gigabytes of RAM on this machine, I do keep it at 8 gigabytes because I haven't seen any performance beyond 8 gigabytes. This is a sweet spot in terms of performance and smoothness and having faster indexing and searching up from the 2 gigabytes. You don't have as many GC stalls, but once I go beyond 8 gigabytes, I do notice the GC pauses that happen are noticeably longer. And I also want to know how much memory is being used at any given time, which is why I have memory indicator right here set so I can see what's going on. And if you're wondering why it's at 2200 M instead of, 8000 to represent our 8 gigabytes, I probably don't have to explain this to you, but it's because Java automatically adjusts memory allocation. So if I come over here and sync Gradle, for example, you'll see the max here increase from 2200, now 2400, 2600, you get the idea. And something else I should do is come through all of my plugins and uninstall or disable all the ones that I'm not currently using. Since all of these are, loading code, listening to what's going on to see if it needs to do anything. So it's, eating some of our resources. So disabling them would get me back some performance, but I don't. Because I'm a true Java dev. Like the garbage collector, I like to have a mess pile up in front of me, and then later on down the line, I'll clean up the mess. And I just haven't gotten around to cleaning up the mess. Now, when it comes to writing code, if I'm more or less purely prompting, I'll just open up Claude Code in the terminal right here because they have heavily subsidized plans. So I go through the actual CLI. And you may notice here, clicking this button opened up Claude Code with bypass permissions on. I just came into settings, Claude Code. And for this, the Claude command is Claude dangerously skip permissions because I'm a maniac and I like to just let it run loose. Oh yeah, and we can see that in Claude, it's using the exact same Java version set up in the project as opposed to the one from the system. So I'm not sitting here arguing with the agent over which version is correct. But unlike Claude, Codex, for example, lets you use your plans in other IDEs. So to have a little better experience, I open up the integrated AI chat feature here and I use Codex within here. And of course you can use Claude Agent and GitHub Copilot and any of these via API. So that way I can see what's happening in real time in the IDE itself. Also, when opening an agent from IDEA, they now have the availability of bundled skills so that equips agents with IDEA's functionality provided by MCP such as IJ Debugger, which makes it really easy to explore any Java runtime as deeply as I need, and all I got to do is ask the agent. But again, the plans are subsidized, which is why I route through those. But I haven't gone full heathen mode just yet. I still will type code. in this beautiful thing called the code editor within the IDE. But I don't type all of the code in here. I will still use AI, but just in the form of code completion. For example, I come down here, start typing, and it recommends the rest of the code based on the pattern we have above here. Hit tab. Oh, let's see what's within there. Yeah, that looks good too. Hit tab. And I might have to come back through here and make a couple of changes, but most of the code is written for me. I don't think I have many changes when it comes to the inline code completion settings here. I do have command completion enabled, which is a feature I've been using a lot more rather recently. Because while there are a handful of shortcuts that I have memorized, there are a lot more that I don't have memorized. So command completion, let's say I want to come to the end of this line and I click ... I'm able to do a lot of different things using command completion. Comment with block comment, comment with line comment, expand lambda body. I can ask AI or reformat this code. I can put something in a try catch if I really wanted to. Or you can just type a single dot and that'll mix them with the normal completion that you're used to. So with this, I can do things like extract a method or apply a fix or generate code or wire a spring bean without remembering the shortcut or the menu that I need to go to in order to do it. And I also feel like people sleep on live templates quite a bit. So I think we're probably all used to sout, where you can easily type a system out println command. But what about sout v, which is the same thing, but prints out a variable alongside it. So we're right under expected version right here. Let's do expected version. And it's that easy. But wait a minute, what if I actually wanted to do an IO println? Let's just use command completion right here and replace this with IO. Or if you realize you want to do IO println, you obviously could have done that with IOP, but that's neither here nor there. And oh wow, something they just added is if you do ... live, it shows live templates for the current context. Yeah, this is going to be nice. Something else I don't want to have to think about is formatting. So I always have actions on save turned on with reformat code and optimize imports enabled. And then come over to configure scope, go through the code style for all of the different files like Java, and you can determine tabs and indents, what size, spaces, wrapping and braces, and all of that. So every time you hit save, it'll reformat. And when you push to a code base with other team members, everything's consistent. And that's how I did it for a while, until I discovered Spotless. That sounded like an ad integration. It wasn't. But the idea behind Spotless is so that the formatting lives in the build, not in every individual's IDE. I also have Palantir's Java formatter installed as well because, well, for one, I really like it. Two, a lot of teams use it. Anyone who has to use the Google Java formatter, I feel a little bit bad for you because look at the difference between this and that. Is it just me that thinks this is a whole lot cleaner than this? The only thing to note is that if you use the Palantir formatter with Spotless, you got to make sure you use IntelliJ's import ordering because Palantir doesn't have one, and then Spotless will fail because the imports aren't properly ordered. And nothing really makes an IDE or code editor better to use than how you navigate through it. And if you're a Vim Motions user, you probably want to skip this part because I do not use Vim Motions. In all seriousness, you can use some of these things with Vim Motions. So for starters, double shift opens up search everywhere where you can search for classes, for files, for symbols, for actions. You just type in whatever you want. You can search for plugins if you want. You can type / to see any of the commands that are here. This is my go-to for a lot of things. And we already discussed command completion, but if you're next to a class name up here and you do a double dot next to it, you're able to navigate from here. So you can go to the members, you can see everything inside of here, and then navigate down to it. And also, there are obviously keybinds, but I don't know all of the keybinds. I know a lot that I use all the time, and I'm always trying to learn. So I have this thing called Key Promoter X installed. It's a plugin. So for example, I come over here and click terminal. I'm going to get this little pop-up right here that says Alt F12. That is the command that I should have used for the terminal. And because it's incredibly annoying to be clicking on things and having a pop-up pop up every single time, you start to learn the commands just for the sake, not even for speed, just for the sake of having that not pop up anymore. And yeah, obviously you can suppress alert for the shortcut, but that's cheating. Just learn the command, the keybind, whatever it's called. And you may have noticed this nice little inline git status right here. Well, that would be git toolbox, which this is exactly what it does. So I know who wrote this code, when they wrote it, and what commit it was a part of. And if I ever want to rename something, Shift F6 is the go-to. because this is much more than find and replace. Because if I had two different classes, one was called user and the other was called order, and they both contained a field called count, for example, and I wanted to change count, and I did find and replace, it would change count in both classes. If I use Shift F6, which that feature is called rename refactoring, well, it'll find and replace all of those changes, but only within that class because it knows that's what you're trying to do. Or if you forget the command, you can just come here and rename, and then it opens up rename refactoring for you. Or you could literally just come through here and change the name, and you see the rename usages. You could just do it that way as well. Now for testing, I run tests directly in the gutter. I can run the entire class, or I can run a specific method if I wanted to. And then when something is broken, a problem needs to be fixed, I can rerun exactly what I fixed instead of having to rerun everything. And I don't know if I mentioned this before, but what I discuss in this video, it's not like every single thing is going to be groundbreaking. A lot are going to be obvious. Some are going to be maybe a little bit unique to me and you could take something away from it. But I do want to make sure I mention as much as I possibly can. Like how I normally have two separate run configs. One is full of unit tests because those are faster and I can run those while I'm coding or whatever. And the other is for integration tests. So those take a little bit longer to spin up. So the idea here is I typically separate the fast ones from the slow ones. And you also see that I use test containers. Here's my test container configuration over here. And what test containers are really lightweight Docker containers that are disposable. So this integration test spins up an actual PostgreSQL in Docker. It runs against it and then it throws it away, disposes of it. And in Spring 4, the wiring is only this little annotation right here at service connection. And the reason I do it this way is so I can spin up a real database. And the reason I want to spin up a real database instead of mocking the repo is because I may or may not have shipped a few data layer bugs in my time because they got past the mock, but almost none of them are going to get past a real database. Oh yeah, and something else I really like is I can just come over here and click Alt-R, and then I can insert whatever data, random data that I need, like this UUID right here, and I can drop it straight into a test without trying to figure out what example UUID I need, and that is the randomness plugin that allows you to do that. Now for debugging, the horror, I know, but no, there are actually some really cool things that I like about debugging. So I'm sure you know about breakpoints, obviously. I'm sure you know about conditional breakpoints. And I also hope you know that you can, instead of deleting this breakpoint, you can just middle click this button right here, and you can disable it. So that way, if it is a conditional breakpoint, you don't lose the condition. I mention that because I have shown a lot of individuals that exact move that for some reason they didn't know existed before. We've all been there, no shade thrown. I don't even want to talk about the simple things that I was unaware of. But one of my favorite things for chasing state bugs is mark object. Because if one object in a batch comes out wrong, or I just want to make sure of what object is what, I can come here and with F11, mark object and give it whatever label that I want, which I'll give it target audit service. So that way I know exactly which one it is. And I can come up to my breakpoint and set a condition for target audit service, setting that as the breakpoint condition so the debugger only stops for that object. Drop frame is another really good one. So if you're like me and sometimes step one line too far when debugging and you go right past the thing you wanted to watch, well, that means you got to restart the app, reproduce the bug and go back there and try again. Or you can use drop frame and have the stack rewind to before the method call. Now it's not perfect. Anything that already happened. So like if you have a database write or something like that, it's still there. But if I just need to watch that line again, I don't have to restart it all. And I'm actually going to call back to the new IJ debugger skill, which will do a lot of this, if not all of this for you. I mean, you can see it in their example that you just ask it what you want with the IJ debugger skill, and that's it. I didn't showcase this before because it's brand new with the release of 2026.2. Also, y'all do know about local history in IntelliJ, right? It's kind of like its own Git history within IntelliJ. So if you make a change that hadn't been committed yet, just come over to local history, show history, and there's every version of it so you can revert back to wherever you need. Yeah, it's nice. So almost everything I've shown so far works in any Java project, but I'm very much a Spring developer as well, so we got to talk about some Spring stuff, starting obviously with the Spring debugger, which I'm just going to briefly showcase because this could be an hour-long video in and of itself. But if you use Spring, definitely use a Spring debugger. It shows you inlay hints like this so you know which beans actually got injected. And you may have noticed earlier that you're able to see exactly which are beans in this panel here. And if you want to see the definition of evaluation service bean, you can navigate directly to it. And let's just say there are a whole lot of other things that the Spring debugger can do for you. And if you've ever used Postman, I bet you can appreciate this. So the built-in HTTP client. You see this little globe icon here next to my mapping annotation? Well, if I click it, IntelliJ generates a request for that endpoint as an HTTP file. It's just plain text, it runs right from the editor, and I can save it in the repo. Then with environment files, I can flip between local and staging. Oh, and there's JPA Buddy. Now, I'm gonna be honest about this one. After enough years of writing JPA, you don't need it, but it's a convenience. Generating an entity or DTO with it is still gonna be faster than typing it, so it stays in my IDE. And there are a handful of other plugins and features I use, like SonarLint, or well, now it's called SonarQube for IDE now, which that rolls off the tongue. But it's basically an inline code reviewer, looking for bugs and code smells and weird patterns and things like that as you go. There's Maven Helper to analyze dependencies to make sure there are no version conflicts. String manipulation, so where I can right click and change whatever I want. Want to change this to camel case? Sure, why not? And you can do this across a bunch of variables, turning them into constants, for example, all at once. Then there's .ignore, which generates and manages getignore files with syntax support. And there are a handful of other things I could talk about, but I think I went over the mainstays, if you will, the main workflow of me in IntelliJ. So that's my IntelliJ IDEA setup. That's what I use, why I use it. I sure hope that helped y'all in one way or another, whether that be just a little feature that you found or a plugin, the randomness plugin, that's a fun one. Or maybe you just like watching content like this. I don't know. Either way, I appreciate it. And I think that's all I got for you. Y'all have a good one and I'll see you next time.